Hello, all. In this week's lecture, I am going to discuss the ending of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. These terms can become a little confusing because in the era of the Republic, the Romans expanded their territories, conquering foreign territories, annexing them, making some of them part of the Republic, granting some of those people citizenship. And so there is an empire within the era of the Republic. But by an empire, what I mean here in this lecture is the idea of the ending of democracy, replacing democracy with the rule of one man and the idea of an inherited or passed down um, a rule, a monarchy as such, an emperor. So why did this happen? The Roman Republic appeared to have robust institutions. The Senate was an enduring institution which represented the noble class, the patricians, and that institution lasts past the Republic, but it turns from being the active lawmaking body into a talking shop. And also, we had the power of the ordinary people as represented by the tribunes and their assembly. They could veto. We had consuls who could only be elected for 1 year. And so, what happened? What went wrong? And a number of things happened. And originally, I had designed a activity in which we jigsaw. I would read different parts of this, but I'm going to cut that out here and just keep it to lecture to save some time. So, one of the first problems was the introduction of violence. Violence begets violence, and this started around 120 BCE with the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and his younger brother Gaius. And these guys were quite inspirational. They wanted to reform Rome, they wanted to transfer wealth from the elites, they were amongst the elites, to the ordinary people. But their plans were quite radical, and some people felt they were trying to seize power. And Tiberius Gracchus, the older brother, was set upon by a group of senators, a posse, if you will, and they stabbed him to death. They killed him. And the problem with this is that people remember this, and violence begets violence, and the same fate awaited his brother. And this led to the idea, not that it was condoned, not that it was welcomed, but once violence enters the story, it's hard to get it out. The second major problem was the power of the generals. As the Republic got bigger, as Rome got more powerful, many charismatic and powerful generals emerged. What's worth bearing in mind is many of the generals were actually consuls, that is, the leaders of the Republic. And once you got to the top of the political tree and became a consul, one of the things that they tended to do was to appoint themselves as generals. Why do that? Well, you win fame, you win conquest, and also you get to bring home the booty of war, the gold, the silver, the slaves to sell. And so, therefore, this was a problem because some of these generals became too powerful. We'll return to that thought in a second. Another big issue, another big problem was the fact that you did have powerful families emerging, like the Metelli, um, and they then developed rivalries, and these rivalries became quite bitter. We saw earlier, we mentioned what happened to the Gracchi brothers. Well, there was two very famous generals, Sulla and Marius, two great generals who won a series of battles fighting together, defeating enemies in North Africa, defeating a huge Germanic tribe, and also defeating, putting down social unrest, the class war in Italy. And these two generals who had great glory brought upon them were called Marius and Sulla. Marius and Sulla. And so let me talk about them here for a moment. Well, Sulla went on to defeat his great rival Marius in a civil war. And Sulla had a prescription list. This is a list of enemies uh, of his people who were linked to Marius, including his nephew, Julius Caesar, who, of course, is the most famous figure in all of antiquity. And he was banished, and quite violent in putting down his enemies. But ultimately, Sulla did actually hand power back to the Senate before his death. He did not want to become a imperial figure. He did become a dictator in his lifetime, but he handed power back to the Senate. But the warning was now there. We had that corruption. We had rivalries between families. We had the power of generals, and this was becoming deeply problematic. Enter, of course, Julius Caesar. Julius Gaius Caesar, an extraordinarily famous figure, an amazing life. So, who was he? How did he become this figure that transformed Rome from a republic to an empire? Well, he had an advantage. He was born into an aristocratic family. The Julii, were a very famous, well-known aristocratic family, and as such, he had a significant advantage. But he was only one of many patricians. So, what separated him out? Well, later in life, of course, the legends were spun that he was descended from a god or the gods. Little known fact I mentioned here in the slideshow is that the cesarean section, the medical procedure that sometimes women will have whilst giving birth, is named, of course, after Julius Caesar, who was birthed in this manner, according to legend. Now, one of the funniest things about Julius Caesar, I find, is that he was elected to many jobs, but one of them was Pontifex Maximus. Now, I find this quite ironic because Pontifex Maximus was the head priest of Rome. Now, why would this be ironic? Because he wasn't exactly a devout holy figure. Yes, he honored the gods in the regular way, but really, Julius Caesar was known as a gambler, as a partier, as someone who enjoyed the company of both men and women, and he was somebody who accumulated a large debt. Now, how could any of this be helpful? Also, a man known for his extraordinary generosity. So he sounds like a likable fool almost, but that's not the case because what he was doing was he was cultivating support, cultivating followers, and he used money, he used bribes, he used generosity to get elected to public positions, and then he used those positions to further boost his power, eventually becoming consul and having himself, like many consuls before him, uh, appointed as a general. But here's the thing: he was an outstanding general. He completed the conquest of Gaul, many times winning victories against overwhelming odds. He like really won the support of his men because yes, he won riches in war, but he shared those riches with his men. So he ended up becoming much loved amongst his legions. Now, the weakening of democracy was occurring at this time. People in the Senate, like Cicero and Cato, were trying to stand up to it. But powerful men, powerful generals like Julius Caesar, and another great general who won victories in the East, in Asia, Pompey the Great, they, together with the wealthiest man in Rome, Crassus. You might remember Crassus from the previous lecture. It was he, Crassus, who raised an army with his own money to put down the Spartan rebellion. These three formed the first triumvirate which dominated the Senate. I wouldn't call it a dictatorship, but certainly these men were, carving up power in Rome between them. And then it didn't last very long though, because Crassus died. Crassus wanted to emulate Pompey and Caesar become a great general. Well, he wasn't, and he died in battle. And then, as Caesar's fame spread, his enemies, people who were afraid of his power back in Rome, like Cato, they convinced Pompey, who had been his friend and ally, to call back Rome, to be publicly demoted and to put it on trial, not trail as I have here. Um, and Caesar made a fateful decision. You can watch it here in the video. This is from a fantastic series, just simply called Rome, which is available on HBO. I would recommend watching it if you have it. Well, it's kind of violent and, well, probably R-rated. But anyway, it's really good. And so he crossed back over the river, which you're not allowed to do, with his legions, and thus began the great civil war in Rome. Julius Caesar, his right hand man, Mark Antony, his adopted son, Octavian, and other supporters, and his legions against Pompey the Great and the Senate Well, Caesar won. Brilliant general, even better than Pompey, outdid him. He beat Pompey in Italy. He chased him to Greece, winning a huge victory. He famously said, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Then he went to Egypt to fulfill the conquest of Egypt. And whilst there, he went into alliance with Cleopatra, the very famous Cleopatra. At this stage, Egypt was a much diminished power. Cleopatra tried to keep some hold of Egypt's destiny by using her feminine wiles to basically form a relationship with Julius Caesar, which she did. Now, back in Rome, Julius Caesar became the dictator of Rome, taking dictatorial powers. He did not take the title of emperor. He was not Rome's first emperor. Dictator was somebody who would rule for a period of time to save the republic. That was the idea. It's not the modern idea of a dictator, but nonetheless, Caesar became one, and he was to rule for 10 years. In this time, he gave citizenship to people in Spain and Gaul, in France, supporters. Remember, he's already popular with the soldiers, winning the support of a lot of the ordinary people of Rome. Very, very popular with the regular people of Rome, the plebeians, because what did he do? He promised, and you see in the video here, he promises to spread wealth to the ordinary people, but then he also does other things. He institutes public works, some of which is built with public money, but some with his own money. Very generous man, Julius Caesar. And then he gives work to ordinary people. He beautifies Rome. He also throws lavish games, gladiatorial games, for the benefit of the people, for their entertainment. So he's very popular with the ordinary people. The idea that the ordinary people always love democracy, well, that's not necessarily the case. That's wishful thinking. He was, of course, though, hated by the senators because he had taken their power. He still consulted with them. He forgave many of the ones who rebelled against him, who had sided with Pompey. He forgave many of them, including Brutus and Cassius and Cicero. Um, so he was, there was certainly positive sides to Julius Caesar. He also reminds me of a modern day great figure like Napoleon. He's a complicated man. He's not a cartoon villain. This isn't, if you will, a Hitler or a Stalin. He's much more charismatic, much more benign, but he's also dictatorial. We can't forget that. He's also manipulative. Anyway, he met his end. I used to have this video in, but it's very violent, so I took it out. He was invited into the Senate. It was the one place where, the soldiers were not really allowed. And so he went into the Senate. His supporters, like Mark Antony, were detained and distracted outside. You can look at that video if you like. Rome, Caesar's assassination. And he was stabbed. He was stabbed by a throng of senators very violently, something like 40 times. And after this, it all fell apart for the conspirators. They fled, and Mark Antony, Julius Caesar's right-hand man, and his adopted nephew, Octavian, uh, formed a second triumvirate with another gentleman, Lupius, I think it was, who I've forgotten now. And this they defeated Julius Caesar's enemies, they persecuted them, and they ruled between them. This was not to last. These are two huge characters who could not stand each other. Mark Antony and Octavian hated each other. A lot of family squabbles there, relationships. Mark Antony was sleeping with Octavian's mother, married to his sister. It's a pretty debauched scene. Octavian didn't like any of this, much more clean cut figure. Mark Antony takes off to Egypt. He ends up falling in love with, yes, none other than Cleopatra. And there was another civil war. And in this civil war, Octavian is the winner. It's very prolonged, very prolonged. Most famous battle is a naval battle, the Battle of Actium. Octavian wins. Might be asking, why was it this guy was the heir to Julius Caesar? Well, Octavian, who took the name Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar did not actually have a living male heir. So he adopted Octavius, who was actually his grand nephew, but he adopted him as his son. Now, Augustus, a bit of a cold fish. You're probably going to see that in the video. Could be quite tough, quite cruel, but very clinical, yes, but also a very rational man, quite a brilliant man, very, very clever. And not only is he Rome's first emperor, Augustus Caesar, Caesar Augustus, but also one of the greatest. He rebuilt much of Rome that had been destroyed in the fighting. Here's that video you guys need to watch. He also retained the Senate, kept them for their advice, even though he retained the all the power. He rewrote the code of Rome, the Augustinian Code. He clarified the law. He was known for having an honest governmental system. He hugely expanded the infrastructure of Rome, the famous Roman roads, and introduced a standardized currency. So a predictable, wise, you know, technocratic, a man who knew what he was doing, ruler. And he also brought, I think his greatest achievement was, do I mention it here? Yes, I do. The Pax Romana. The Pax Romana. What is Pax Romana? The peace of Rome. He brought peace to Rome. He ended the wars. He brought peace, stability. And this allowed art and engineering to flourish. Interestingly, he also, the era of the citizen soldier was over. He made the army a permanent army, that is, a trained professional soldiers. This Pax Romana would last probably for like 400 years. I mean, it's not all peaceful, but this does allow things to flourish. So, very interesting character. Now, before we finish up today, we'll talk about some good emperors, some bad emperors. Augustus was a very good emperor. He may not be to everyone's liking, but he was very effective. So, other good emperors. Well, let's see. I'm going to skip past this. So, Trajan. Trajan, I mentioned here, is great emperor. He rules I can't remember the dates, but it basically he's ruling when the empire reached its furthest extent. He defeats the Parthians, who were like the Persians, modern day Iran, Mesopotamia. He oversaw a building program in Rome. Trajan's column, wonderful, beautiful column. I would have done a art analysis worksheet with you guys on this. Can't do it, not in class. Uh, Also, the man who introduced social welfare policies, the welfare state, introducing things that benefit the people in times of hardship. Wow, what a legacy that goes into modern times. One other very worthwhile emperor I think that's worth a mention is one of the great emperors, a guy who's often overlooked, but I like him, Claudius. Claudius. And Claudius is one of the early emperors. He overcame huge disadvantages. He was physically disabled with a pronounced limp and partially deaf. Now, in our times, we would accept these things, but in Roman times, this was considered a reflection of mental weakness. Therefore, he was dismissed. He wasn't taken seriously, even though he was from the famous Julia Claudian family. And owing to basically the fact that his really crazy uncle, Caligula, we'll mention more of him next, basically pretty much killed everyone else in the family. Um, Claudius was dismissed as this like disabled guy, and when Caligula was assassinated, Claudius took over. Claudius was a great emperor. He was the emperor who oversaw the invasion and the conquest of much of Britain. Um, but he also built infrastructure in Rome, most famously the Aqua Claudia, the aqueduct bringing in the fresh water into the people of Rome, the greatest of all the aqueducts. And he also was a great legal mind, Claudius, attending trials. Claudius's big problem was his taste in women. uh, he, he basically married a woman who was known for her beauty, but she didn't have too much of an interest in poor old disabled Claudius, I'm afraid. And once she got him to accept her son, Claudius's adopted son, Nero, as his heir, well, Claudius mysteriously died. And most people accept the idea that Nero and his mother killed him. So this brings us on then to the bad emperors. And of course, this is much more fun, the bad emperors. So Nero, just mentioned, the son of Claudius, or I should say stepson. Well, Nero was terrible. Nero was put into power by his mother, who loved him, but his mother was very, very interfering, so he didn't like that. So he had his mother killed. He had his killed, I believe, and his sister killed, and many other notable patricians. He's terribly paranoid. Thought people were out to get him, even when they weren't, so he had them killed. Um, there's a very famous saying, fiddling while Rome burns. This is the idea that doing nothing in a time of great crisis. The saying comes from Nero. There was the terrible fire of Rome, in which Nero basically didn't do anything, didn't order out the firemen. Yes, there were firemen in Rome, didn't order them out, didn't do much at all. Sat there apparently playing the fiddle whilst the city burned. Now, what happened to him? Oh, also fun. There's a video here, The Madness of Nero. It's fun checking that out. Really crazy stuff. Um, of course, when you're paranoid and you kill supposed opponents, then people really do want to kill you because they're afraid you will kill them. And so there was a plot by the Praetorian Guard, that's the bodyguard of the emperor, to do away with him. They came to get him, but he knew they were coming, so he killed himself. Now, one other emperor who's worth mentioning for his madness and badness was Caligula. Caligula was actually only the third of all Roman emperors. We have basically Augustus, we got Tiberius, and then we have Caligula. Caligula started off well enough. He was apparently quite capable, quite liked. He was a handsome young man, considered to be quite talented. Then he got ill. He had illness in his first or second year in charge of Rome. He'd retained the Senate. He was talking to them, seemed to be doing well. Then he had an illness, and during this illness, he came out of it with all sorts of delusions, declared himself to be a god. Now, other Romans, such as Julius Caesar and Augustus, have been declared to be gods after they died. But Caligula wasted no time saying that he was a god. He was known for his brutality, his savagery, and really for all sorts of disrespect to people. I'm not so sure if this story is true. I don't think historians are sure about this, but apparently at one stage Caligula had his horse enter the Senate and take a seat in the Senate just to show his contempt for the senators. Of course, when you start behaving like this, you accumulate a lot of enemies, and they eventually did him in. So anyway, that's the end of the lecture. Please look out for the quiz on this, and please watch all the videos that accompany this lecture. Thank you.